Now, terrorism is back on everyone's minds this week, well, over the past couple of weeks, really, after New South Wales Police undertook a sweeping counter-terrorism operation across Sydney. Shockingly, 5 of those arrested have been charged with terrorism and extremism offences. ASIO boss Mike Burgess said this week there's a 50% chance of a terrorist attack in the next year. Let's bring in my defence expert, Lincoln Parker. Lincoln, great to see you.
G'day, Erin.
What was your reaction to that?
Well, I think it shows weakness on the part of Prime Minister Albanese when he's not taking these threats seriously. And at the same time, we're getting a rise in threat level. We're getting the ASIO boss coming out and saying this on a regular basis. And we remember that it was Prime Minister Albanese that removed the bosses, the chiefs of both ASIO and ASIS from his National Security Cabinet Committee. Now, why would you do that? Particularly when threat levels are rising all around the world, but particularly here in Australia at a time where there's wars going on in the Middle East, it's astounding.
What do you think is driving it? Obviously, the Middle East, Gaza, that's behind a fair bit of it.
Yeah, well, in Australia, we saw after the October 7th the nasty attacks that Hamas did into Israel, killing over 1,200 civilians. Penny Wong, the Foreign Minister of Australia, let in over 2,200 Palestinians into Australia, basically unvetted. So you're getting a lot of immigrants, particularly Muslims, that don't, potentially share our values, particularly when it comes to women. And this is borne out where you see in the New South Wales Police, they have a dedicated Middle East crime squad just for the Middle East, whereas they don't have that for any other demographic, but just for the Middle East. And I would say to viewers who perhaps watched us last week when we were talking about Israel's attack into Iran and their retaliation, you and I actually received a threatening email to our personal email addresses where this person says, and I quote, "Game over for the Jewish state when Iran attacks next time with nuclear warheads aimed at Israeli cities rather than military bases." So this is not a time for the Prime Minister to go weak on security.
No, could not agree with you more. Talk to me about the illegal immigrants who managed to get onto an ADF base. What?
Oh, well, again, I mean, this is just running into the same story that we're discussing. You and I were sitting here over a month ago talking about these illegal boat people arriving off our northwest coast. And at the time, the Prime Minister Albanese was saying, well, no, it didn't happen, because they didn't find any evidence. Well, there was evidence there, and now it comes out that in fact it did happen. And not only that, it was Chinese. So we have Chinese that have come here illegally, we didn't know, and they walked through undetected into an ADF base. I mean, come on.
You say unbelievable, but there's a part of you that goes, yeah, I get it. Yeah, of course they did. Why wouldn't they have? Talk to me quickly about what the UK is doing in terms of investment into defence.
Well, it seems like the UK is at least taking this seriously, and Prime Minister Sunak said this week that he's putting the UK on a war footing and he's going to increase the UK defence budget up to 2.5%. Now, I'd say that's not war footing, but it's a whole lot better than what we're doing, for instance, with all of the threats we've got. We're at less than 2%, and he's at least pushing his up to around 2.5%, whereas we're cutting back from the Australian Border Force, which would help with these illegal arrivals. We're cutting back on all of defence. So what he's doing is good.
Perfect time, the most dangerous position we find ourselves in 80 years. It's the end of the Second World War and we're cutting.